I became conversational in Spanish without any studying or memorization. How did I get here? Well, when I tried learning languages in the past, like everybody, I was excited and I started using apps on my phone. But after a couple of weeks, I quickly found myself having lost all motivation and, more importantly, any progress I might have made. But when I booked to go and see my family in Spain, I realized this had to change. They don't speak English, so I had no choice but to try and find something that actually worked. What I discovered not only worked, it was actually easier. In this video, I'm going to show you how what I discovered helped me learn Spanish without studying, the scientific explanation as to why this works so well, and how you can do the same in any language without burning out. Oh, and why the key to your progress is this glass of M&Ms. But first you need to understand an important difference between two things. So if I ask you to tell the meanings of every word you know in English, there are some words that you have a sense of, but maybe not be able to give me an exact definition. For example, what's loquacious mean? Don't worry, for a native speaker, that's totally normal. You might understand it in context, and for some random words, you might be able to use them from time to time too. Even though you don't know them in terms of the dictionary definition of them, as an English speaker, you probably have a good sense of them. Well, maybe not loquacious. Now, if I made you remember a list of words and their definitions in a language that you don't know, if you do see those words in context, you probably won't recognize them. Even if you do, they still might not make sense to you in that particular context. You've learned those words directly, but you still haven't picked them up in the same way that a native speaker has. So you might say, what's this got to do with making language learning easier for you? Well, I'm glad you asked. Have you ever had someone say something in the language you're learning, but only understood a few words? Your brain is like a detective. It's looking for clues in order to find out what's happened. Has it heard those sounds before? Does it know those words? And it's also looking for other clues like tone, facial expression, or gestures, or even pictures if you're reading. Like the detective trying to crack the case, your brain might not have all the information it wants, and so it has to figure out and have a best guess at the meaning. And so the thing that your brain will do first is try and understand what's happened in this metaphorical crime scene. So before it worries about how the sentence is put together, your brain just wants to work out what someone is saying to you. It takes the information it already knows along with whatever new information it can find in order to understand the meaning of each sentence. So using words and grammar that it's picked up already, it will try and figure out the meaning in any new words or phrases that it hears. By finding content that is aimed at learners, like I did in Spanish, you can let the brain do this without having to study at all. Your brain is, first of all, trying to figure out what is going on, which actually has really big implications for us as learners, especially when it comes to picking up the grammar. Let me show you why. Imagine you're learning to drive a car for the first time. When you first sit in the seat, excited but nervous, there's a lot to take in, right? You adjust the seat, you check your mirrors, you indicate, you pull away, change gear, and then just try not to kill anyone. And by the end of your lesson, you're probably going to feel mentally exhausted. Consciously thinking about all of this stuff is probably quite tiring, right? Your brain can only do so much at any one time, which is why people are more likely to crash if they're texting whilst they're driving. Now, I want you to imagine you hear someone say something in the language that you're trying to learn, and let's say it's right at the limit of what you can understand. If you're having to really pay attention to what's being said in order to work out the meaning of what they're trying to say, then you're less likely to notice the way that they're trying to say it. So if you are only just about understanding someone, it's going to be really hard for your brain to pick up the grammar because it's spending its energy just trying to understand what's going on, which is great news for us as language learners. I'll explain why. Well, if we find really difficult content, then our brain is mainly going to be focused on trying to understand what is going on and the meanings of what's been said. And of course, if it's too difficult, you just can't get the meaning at all. Remember, your brain is looking for clues. And if it doesn't recognize enough words, it won't be able to work out what's going on. If we want to have more clues to not only understand the new words, but also notice the grammar and hopefully pick some of it up, then we need to find content that is easier for us to understand. That way we can notice the structure, the pronunciation, and the new words that we might not have seen before. There are more clues for the detective to work it out. So what does this mean for us as language learners? Well, that's where the M&Ms come in. So here is this glass full of M&Ms, and here is this empty glass. No offense, but this is your brain. You haven't started learning the language you want to learn, and so there's none of it in there yet. When you hear or see some of the language you want to learn, let's say Spanish, your brain gets a little piece of it. It does this without you trying to force it, but it only gets a tiny bit, and it can only do that if the content is easy enough for your brain to pick up enough clues and work out some of the meaning. You don't instantly know 100% of the word when you first find it, but your brain might understand it in that context. And so you need more time with the language for your brain to fill in the blanks. So 30 minutes watching YouTube, 35 minutes reading a book designed for learners of the language. Now, none of this happens consciously, but your brain does figure out the meanings over time if you give it enough input, that is, enough content in the language. You might not be able to remember all of those words on purpose, but you still know the language deep down without having to think about it. It's easy because it's a natural process. Using this method, you're so much less likely to burn out. You keep going until eventually you have a really good grasp of the language. Learning new words and grammar is essential if you're going to pick up a language, and you might find that some words just don't stick no matter how hard you try. This next video will explain why and what you can do about it. Cheers.